Hello everyone, Sidewin here. Today I'm going to be showing how you can use Archives Nethys to assist you in picking monsters for your Pathfinder 2nd Edition game. So one note here is that you do not have to use Archives Nethys, and in fact the creature building rules are extremely easy to use, so I do encourage you to make your own monsters. But when you don't have much time, just finding one on Archives Nethys is usually ideal. So the first thing you should nearly always do is go into rarities and minus out unique, because those are all adventure path enemies and they're usually incredibly specific to those. As you can see, that takes down the number of options by nearly 1,000. So generally unique monsters just have certain abilities that make them hard to integrate or hard to use as anything but what they are, and they can also sometimes spoil adventure paths, so I don't recommend you use them. Next, the thing you should do is set your level range. In general, with Pathfinder, you want plus or minus 4 levels of your PC level, with the exception of the lower levels. So if you have a group of characters under level 5, you probably want to go to a maximum of 3 over. So for an example, let's say that you have a level 1 party. I would set the maximum level to free. And the minimum level can be as low as it goes. So you don't need to type anything here. But then once you would hit, say, level 5, you should probably set this minimum level to 1 and this maximum level to 8 or 9. At which point the set of monsters changes. But I'll use the example of a level 1 prep because it's probably what a lot of you are looking for, since most people playing Pathfinder start at level 1. So as you can see, that does narrow down the number of options, but there's still a lot of them. And from this point forward, you're really just looking to fit what your intention is for the encounter. So for instance, if you're running an encounter in a cemetery where there's a bunch of undead, you can go here to traits and select undead, at which point you have this set of options laid out. Then you can kind of consider what encounter you're trying to do. So let's say you're running a short adventure where you're going to have free encounters in the cemetery. So there's a necromancer resurrecting a bunch of undead, and you want the players to go through and fight 3 different groups. And your idea is that the first one's going to be a swarm of zombies of some kind. Then the second one, you want it to be fewer monsters but more threatening ones, and you want the final one to be the mini boss. So you don't really have time to prep. What do you do to find those options in this list? So first off, since you know one of them you want it to be zombies, you could try going to traits and selecting zombie to get limited to those options. And as you can see, there's a couple of different ones. So at level 1, you will know that generally you do not want an encounter very far above your party's encounter budget, which you can find those by searching encounter building rules Pathfinder 2E, and it should just come up with building encounters, at which point you can see the EXP budget. And you can go down here to see a recommended party level for a certain type of creature. And you might notice that the lowest level zombie in here is a level -1, the zombie hound. And that's marked as any standard creature. So you couldn't really use as many of them as you might have been hoping to. At which point you might go in and say, I'll widen it a bit. So then here, since you know you're going for that lower level stuff, you go back to level and set it to a maximum of level -1. At which point you have 6 possible options, all level -1. And honestly, you're probably starting to realize at this point that you're not going to be able to do a massive horde unless you build your own monster. Which you could do by, say, here's a zombie shambler. Then you can go down and there are the zombie abilities. And right here, you can add stuff. And then if you go to monster building rules, you can find what's needed for a level 1 monster, and use swarm rules, and then you can have a zombie swarm. But if you don't have the time, 2 or 3 of these zombies would work fairly well for that encounter. So now I'll give an example of the encounter that's supposed to be with a couple of tougher ones, but not quite the mini-boss. So for that, I generally like to go up to party level, and you don't usually want to go above it. But since you're looking for something stronger, you might not want level -1 necessarily. So you might set the minimum to 0. So assuming you have a party of 4, then your encounter budget is going to be equal to 80 in this case, because you're going for a moderate encounter. The first one was supposed to be probably a low threat warm-up, and since the other enemy is level -1, you'll have 2 of them. So then for this one, you're looking to fill an encounter budget of around 80, meaning that you can have 2 creatures of party level, or you could do 2 creatures of party level -1 and 1 below it. In general, I lean towards doing the 2 of party level for this type of encounter, so in that case, I would be looking for level 1 enemies. And technically, these are level -2, if I'm thinking right. But if you're doing a first-time warm-up encounter, I still like to go overly easy. So if it's the -2, you could do 3 of them for the low threat encounter. Either way, it doesn't make a huge difference depending on your party size. But if you have a party of 3, be more careful about strictly matching that. So for this next tougher encounter, you're still looking at undead, but you want something that's a little more threatening. So for example, you have a more powerful zombie if you wanted, like a contagious zombie. And another one in here that might make sense could be a skeleton, or it could be a ghoul stalker. And you can always go through the other ones to see, like, oh, that looks nice, and see if there's something that fits better. Generally, with zombies, undead, constructs, Pathfinder has a lot of options that other things don't. And in this case, if you're looking for... So what I would usually lean towards is this, because it's closer to the classic ghoul. And I like using a ghoul encounter to introduce a couple of rules. But you could always go with any of them. You just want to think, okay, so which one fits best in flavor, or which one is the simplest? So in that case, if you're looking for the absolute simplest, it would most likely be the zombie, because it basically can just punch or bite. It doesn't get more complicated than that. Right, yeah. Pretty much this punch, bite, and it can inflict disease. The skeletal soldier might be simpler in that it doesn't cause disease symptoms, but it has a lot of resistances which might teach your players some interesting stuff. So if you're just building a level 1 encounter, you could use any of these and it wouldn't really make a huge difference. But you do want to note that, say, if it's the plague zombie, a player will very likely get infected with zombie rot. Just plan for it happening. And then you might have to use a spell or go back to town to cure it. And it also deals damage, which for a level 1 party member, it could potentially kill them, depending on like a d6 hit die. So from those, you can really just pick one. So I'll just say picking a Festrog. Then by this point, your players will have been worn down on resources. And for low-level parties, you don't generally want to go into extreme. You might go into severe, but really, like for a mini-boss, I like to go in between moderate and severe, just leaning on the low end of severe. So for this case, I would go in here and then set the level to 1 higher to check. And I'll also expand the range to lower, so that if you wanted to have the mini-boss with a couple of lackeys, you could take a level +1 enemy, that's 60 EXP, and then you could take the party level -2, That's the -1 level enemy. And if your party is willing to take on something tougher, you could go up to 100 EXP total in the encounter. You might want to consider a little bit whether or not you do that before you actually go into the encounter, but framing it that way makes it easy to just remove one of the monsters without ruining the fight. Whereas if you pick a party level +2, that's already taking your entire moderate encounter budget, so you can't really tone it down easily. So since I'm looking for a necromancer type of thing, I might not necessarily want to go with an undead. Maybe they're alive. And it's at this point that I'll show you the NPCs tab. NPCs are not always added into this full list, but this list specifically pre-filters. So then again, I'll turn off the unique and I'll set the level range to 2 and minimum of 1. And at this point, there is a set number. And then there are specific creature families, which there are traits for here. And going through these, I'll try setting divine, nothing. And then none of these are especially obvious. Maybe unholy, nah. But you could go through here and figure out, like, Blasphemer of Zon Kusan. You could modify it to work for your specific situation, where, say, in this case, they're attempting to cast spells, but it's really just a incompetent necromancer. And flavor-wise, they're not actually trying to summon up zombies in combat. That type of thing can get more complicated and isn't really a good level 1 thing. But you could just reflavor this. And then you could add in the 2 zombie scramblers, at which point you finished your level 1 free encounter one-shot type thing. And if you add 2 or 3 more encounters along the same theme, you could make it pretty much a full dungeon and enough to get to level 2. But the same thought process works for any type of encounter you're trying to build. Like, instead of undead, if you were trying to build something that's fighting against demons, you could go in here and choose the demon trait. And then you have the demon options of the level. And you can just choose which one fits best for your situation. Anything you can't find, you should always feel free to build yourself, because the rules are extremely accessible. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful in allowing you to understand how to build out encounters in Pathfinder 2nd Edition using the tools given to you by Archives of Nessus.